And welcome into Growth Profits. It's Friday. And today we're going to talk to you about one of the most important things we can talk about. You didn't fail. You simply learned. We're going to talk about it. Stay with us. Hi, folks. I'm Sean Crabtree.
And I'm Cameron Bailey.
We don't want to change the way you do business.
We want to change the way you're thinking about your business.
We want you to have better results, happier clients, and make more money.
Let's get it started.
And thanks for joining us here on Growth Profits, where we come to you again every single week with ways for you to have happier clients, better results, making more money, and enjoying the ride. Today, we're going to talk about one of the things that you and I deal with. All the time.
All the time, man.
The clients that we work with, and I got a real specific story about this, but you and I are dealing with this literally every day, where clients...
We deal with this ourselves too, not just with clients. I mean, with our own personal businesses and everything we have going on. I mean, we deal with this all the time.
That's a good point.
I mean, did you fail?
Or did you learn?
Or did you learn? And,
right.
and really, when you think about those things, it sounds simple. Oh, duh. Yeah. But actually keeping with it and moving forward is something that's pretty hard to do.
And it's one of the most important things, because if you're viewing a result that wasn't hit as a failure, then that mindset carries with you into the next thing that it is that you're doing, or at the very least, it can affect how you implement that particular strategy in that particular thing again. And so, what we're really talking about here is changing the mindset. As almost everything we talk about, it always comes from be, do, have. It works that way. Be, do, have. I got to change the way I'm thinking, how it is that I'm being in my head. That will determine what it is that I do. If I'm looking at not hitting a particular result, we see this be affecting people all the time. If I look at I didn't hit a particular result as a failure, I mean, that drives a certain kind of behavior. One of the things where you and I see it the most is, and we hear this a lot, we don't want to set our goals too high.
I want my goals to be achievable.
Right.
Man.
Because if our goals are too unrealistic, then we don't hit it, we'll be let down.
Or we'll feel bad.
We will have failed.
If I don't set the number, if I don't hit the number I'm trying to achieve, then obviously I'm a failure, Sean.
And that mindset of being a failure plays into everything it is you do. You got to change that mindset. You got to completely fix that, because I can tell you this. In the 25 years that I've been studying successful people, they never look at themselves as failure. And if you think about like the most successful people in the world, many of them have had bankruptcy several times with large numbers.
Yeah.
Right? Several times.
Yeah.
But they never looked at one of those bankruptcies as a failure.
Or they never stopped.
They never stopped.
They never let it slow them down.
It was an opportunity to learn something.
Tenacity, having the tenacity to continue to move forward. But that comes from thinking differently. That doesn't come from doing anything differently. It starts with how you think. And
we're going to tell you 3 things that you need to do to be able to change this. But it's important to realize that everything we talk about on all of our channels is how it is that you're being in your head will determine what it is that you do, and what it is that you do will determine the results that you get to have. You got to really look at what we're talking about today, not as a philosophical thing, but as a real life scenario. You didn't fail. You learned. Now, there are some things that you need to do. There's some steps that you need to take to be able to make sure that you're maximizing that. But I'll give you a great example of a situation that I ran into just before we came on air here. There's a client that we have. It happens to be a dental practice. Great group, really, really strong team. And a series of things happened that threw them off kilter. The big snowstorm hit.
Oh, a series of things.
The big snowstorm hit. Traffic is terrible. Their whole day basically canceled because nobody can get out of the house. They're not expecting this kind of storm in November. Mm-hmm. So the whole day was screwed up. Long story short, 2 patients showed up. Turned out to be a really big opportunity, huge opportunity. because of the way that they were thinking in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
they did not implement the strategies that they developed. There are specific steps that they normally take with new patients, not only from the intake call and all the strategies that we help them develop, intake call, chairside, value creation, handoffs, bringing the patient back, all of these things.
They allowed the things around them to control.
They allowed the circumstances
Okay.
to be different, right?
Mhm.
So the two patients showed up. Both of them needed a tremendous amount of work, large amount of work. Together, these were two really big cases. And they threw their strategies out the window because they're looking at it like, you know what, the day's canceled. The snowstorm has messed us all up. These patients are here. Let's skip our strategy. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and roll the dice. Well, of course, it backfired. They lost both of the cases. And for a minute, they're looking at it like, we failed to implement our strategies. Why do we suck? Why are we so, Now, if you allow that kind of mentality, and this is the conversation we had today, if I'm looking at it like, I failed to implement the strategies that we decided on, that we were going to stick to, we failed to do it, we suck, that can lead to, why are we even doing this anyway? That can lead to
questioning everything.
We're failures.
Yeah. That happens all the time in every
That can
business.
lead to, you know what, let's lower our goals.
Yeah.
Right? Because we don't want to be disappointed. Because we're looking at ourselves as failures. All of that is hogwash. So what do you think, Mr. Bailey, are some things?
You didn't fail, you learned. But you only learn if you are in the right mindset and the right mind, right space in your head to understand that. So really the first step for me is step one is you've got to understand there is no perfect. There is no perfect. It
doesn't exist.
Perfect does not exist.
It does not
and
exist.
I don't understand, as small business owners, as entrepreneurs, as salespeople, sometimes we get in our mind that we have to be perfect. A situation has got to get us to a certain end that we have in our mind, and it has to be perfect. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't exist. So the faster that you can,
even if you hit your goal, even if you achieve what it is, it's not perfect. There's always a way.
Always. And there's
one of the things that you and I do on a regular basis
mm-hmm.
is it doesn't matter if we're on a video conference with one of our clients, if we're at a speaking engagement or whatever. I mean, number one thing is we're talking about you didn't fail, you learned. But here's the thing, to be able to operate in this mindset, what Cameron's saying is the first thing you got to do is realize that perfection, being perfect, is non-existent. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And to drive that group deeper, one of the things that you and I always do is whenever we're done with a certain speaking engagement or even a video conference or a team visit or whatever, the first thing you and I do when we get in the cab is, okay, what could we have done differently?
Right.
Not better.
Not
as in it was bad,
right?
But we're always communicating, and that I think that puts number one in perspective. If you're operating from this mindset that, hey, what could we have done back? What could we have done differently to get a better result? How could we have been different to get a better result? Right. Hey, what worked? Yeah. Right? What worked and what didn't? Right? I think that solidifies number one. Perfect doesn't exist. It's just you and your team moving forward and learning. You gotta
look at it like a golf scorecard. At the end of the day, if you par number 5 hole and it's a par 4, it doesn't matter if you hit it in the trees twice.
Well, par it. That'd be a bogey.
The number 5 hole.
Oh, the number 5
and
hole.
It's a par 4.
Oh.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the number on the course.
So it's the 5th hole.
The 5th hole.
But it's a par 4.
But it's a par 4.
And you parred it.
That means you scored a 4.
Yeah, okay.
So if you parred...
I don't get many of those. You got to help me out with that.
If you par number 5, it doesn't matter. The scorecard doesn't reflect whether you hit it in the woods or whether you hit it over the green or whatever happened. It reflects that, you know what, you parred and we got to a solution and we got to an answer. And in business, that's the mindset. There is no perfect. It's, did we get to a desired result we were looking for?
If not,
If not, we didn't fail. There's something that we've learned.
There's something we can learn.
And even when you get to the result, there's still, like Sean said, there's still things that you learn. So you've got to have a thirst for knowledge. You got to have a thirst for always questioning, what could we have done differently? How could we have said things differently?
And so what we're talking about right now, to be able to even get into this, you got to operate from the first thing that Cameron said. Perfection does not exist.
And that's hard if you're an engineering minded type person, or you're a doctor and you deal in,
millimeters,
microscopic things. Perfect does exist in your mind a lot of times.
But you just got to get to the case where it's not. I mean,
Exactly.
you got to just realize it's never perfect, right? So there's if you can operate from that first place in your head. And like I say, one of the things we do on a regular basis is we're always asking, hey, what could we have done differently? It's not about blame or bad or wrong. It's about, hey, what can we learn from this, and what could we have done differently?
You didn't fail, you learned. You didn't fail, you learned.
You didn't fail, you learned. But step one is you got to be able to be in that mindset. You have to realize perfection does not exist. And we try to make that habit. We try to drive that belief really deeper by implementing things like that. What could we have done differently on a regular basis? Now, if you can get to number one, now you're ready for number two.
There is no perfect.
That's right. Number one is
she don't exist.
Mr. Producer, does she?
She don't exist, bro. There is no perfect.
Mr. Producer, is there a perfect? Is there a perfect she?
No. Don't answer that question.
See, I thought he was going to say, well, I got one. But we gave him the opportunity.
I found the only one there was.
Oh, see? Now, his wife is going to hear that and go, okay, big boy, that was just cheap. I knew you were playing to me on that one. But number one, we're talking about you didn't fail, you learned. The number one thing you got to do is realize perfection does not exist. If you can be in that place, then I would have you do some things like we're talking about here, where you got some habit that's created around that belief that perfection doesn't exist. If you get to that place, now, if you realize that perfection doesn't exist, then it really is always something. Even if you hit a result, there's always something. If you didn't hit a result, or if you did hit a result, either way, it's not failure. There's something we can learn, because perfection doesn't exist.
Right.
Second thing you got to do, when something happens that in the past you would have said, oh, it's a failure.
Or it's not ideal.
Right. When something doesn't happen, here's the second thing you got to do. When you didn't achieve what you thought you could achieve, realize and actually ask yourself, what is the thing that I've learned? And you know what? Write it down. It can't be just like I did a little video recently on this, basically saying, hey, it's BS. This old saying that says knowledge is power, it's BS. Mm-hmm. Knowledge is only power if you implement the lesson. Yeah, right?
Exactly.
So part of implementing the lesson is when you didn't get to where you wanted to go, write it down.
If you're going to pay if you're going to pay the price, in your business, whether that be a lack of sales or whether that be a lack of revenue, if you're going to pay that price, man, at least take away something you learned so you don't do it again.
Now, I would go a little deeper on this, because here's the thing. When all of us are little, right, and there are lessons in life that you've not learned yet, like touching the hot stove. Mm. When the stove is hot and you touch it, like I grabbed one when I was little. I didn't just touch it, like I grabbed it.
I got a hold of the curling iron one time.
Just grabbed it like that. Well, here's the thing.
My mom, boy, she felt so bad.
Because you just peeled off, blistered all over your hands. Well, those kinds of lessons, you don't have to write them down.
No.
Because it burns so bad.
So deep.
So deep. I mean, you take away, lesson learned. Do not grab the curling iron. I do not touch the stove, right? You don't have to write those lessons down. But in business, if you understand the first thing we said, which is perfection doesn't exist, then you're going to have a series of misses. You're going to, over the lifetime of your business, you're going to have a series of those. Some of them are going to be painful enough, like the stove, that you don't have to write it down. I would submit that the majority of them are not going to be that painful.
And not that apparent.
You've got to physically, emotionally stop yourself and pause and write down, what are the things, in a very introspective way, what are the things that I learned? Right?
There is no autopilot.
There is no autopilot.
There in business,
It's got to be intentional.
If you're an entrepreneur, salesperson, a business owner that's listening to this, there is no autopilot. There is you and your business, and there's all kinds of minute changes that you're making constantly. And if you put it on autopilot, then you're missing the opportunity to learn. So what I wrote down, you have number 2. Another step to that is you've got to understand that the execution is the key, not the idea. In other words, if I've done something, I didn't get the result I was looking for, it wasn't that possibly what I did was the wrong thing. It's possible that there was another way to execute to get a different result. Execution. What did I learn from the execution? So when you write things down, don't just write down ideas. Write down what are the action steps, execution.
Right. And so what we're talking about is this mindset. Look, you don't fail. You only learn. And we talked about number 1, you got to come from a place where perfection doesn't exist.
That's hard.
If you're in that mindset, then you can put some habits in place so that you're driving that groove a little bit deeper. If you are coming from that place, you can go to number 2. What is the thing I've learned? And it's got to be intentional. You got to write it down because, like I said, not all these misses are going to be so painful that they're burned into your memory, right? You need to write those things down. And number 3.
And make it tangible.
Make it tangible. And this is probably goes right into number 3. And this is where we see people. To some degree, I think it's human nature,
Everybody.
You missed. You stopped and analyzed. Hopefully you wrote it down. What is the thing I learned from this? But then you know what? If you're not careful, if you don't do number 3, you miss again on the same scenario that you already learned the lesson on from the first time. So how do you prevent that?
Yeah, you keep missing it.
You got to go to number 3. Okay. I realize perfection doesn't exist.
Number 1.
Number 2
doesn't exist.
I've intentionally written down the things that I learned from this miss. Now, number 3, what are the action steps? And you got to think your way through this. It's not as simple as what I'm going to say, but what are the action steps that need to be put in place so you never have to learn that lesson again?
What am I going to implement? What am I going to do differently so that I'm not in this position?
Do we need to change a rule?
Yeah, if I don't get to a result that I'm after, number 1, I realize, all right.
Do we need to have a new agreement?
There is no perfect.
Do we need to change a process?
Yeah. Do we need to change a game plan?
Do we need to implement a step?
Yeah. So
do we need to remove a step?
What did I learn? I write down what I learned, and then I say, okay, now how can I take what I learned and put that into implementation directly with action?
So here's an example. We were just talking about a call that we had with the client early on where there was a bigger case. There was a series of misses, and they didn't get the case. Either one of the cases.
They didn't close the deal.
So one of the things they learned, they didn't close the deal. Either one of them. And so one of the things they learned in terms of one of the things they learned was we should not have presented on that day because we weren't ready. The patient wasn't ready. The patients were thinking they were coming in for this little thing, but there was a whole bunch of things that needed to be done.
The expectations were not clear.
The client was not ready. And so we had already learned that lesson before.
Mm-hmm.
What we have to do now in this particular office
is stop.
Because they've already learned that lesson before. They got to go, okay, what is the action step that's going to prevent us from saying, well, the circumstances are different. Let's go ahead and do it. Let's go ahead and present it, right? Hey, the parking lot is full of snow. All the patients have canceled. We got some time. Let's present it, right? What is the action step that's going to prevent us from saying, hey, the circumstances are changed. Let's go ahead and roll the dice, right? That is what we're talking about with number 3. What are the action steps? And go to the next step. Like, who's going to be the person to sort of be the stopper of that, right? You know what I'm saying?
The holder of the accountability.
Right. Who's going to be the keeper of this thing, right? We realize perfection doesn't exist, number 1. Number 2, we realize there is something intentionally that we need to write down that we learn from this. Now, number 3, okay, what is the action step that's going to take this lesson we learned into implementation? Who's going to be the person to make sure that we don't veer from that moving forward? What are going to be the backstops? And how's it going to be implemented? Do we need to remove a step in our strategy? Do we need to implement a step in our strategy? Is it something that needs to be tracked? Do we need to revisit it? Right? All of these things are what's going to allow you from
how many
having
times
to
have you and I been in a situation where we're talking to a customer, a prospective customer, a prospect, and the expectations are not clear, and we lose the deal because we did not set the expectations, or somehow our process throughout the moment there was an opportunity for us to do something different.
Or I'll give you a better example.
I've been in that situation a million times, and you know what? I continue to screw it up. I will continue to screw it up
Because you need to change your process.
Well, no, what I'm saying is
you need to get a step.
No.
You need to intentionally right.
I continue to screw up.
Perfection
things.
doesn't exist.
I continue to screw up things because there's always another step. There's always another level. There's always another thing to learn. You can always. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I think so. I was on a group call the other day. I had lots of clients on the screen. We were doing a video conference, and these guys are so hungry to learn the steps of the sales process. I
Want to give it to them.
See their eagerness, and I feed off that, right? So I'm very eager to give them the steps that they long for.
Yeah.
But what you and I both know is, if you don't lay down the thought processes first, then those steps are meaningless.
They're just do things. Right?
So we have to, I'm constantly having to remind myself of this lesson that I've learned, because I want my client to get these steps. I can't bypass the thing that's going to help them implement those steps, which is the mindset. So I'm constantly battling that in my head. Hey, I can't give into that because I see the circumstances. They're dying to get the steps, and I really want to give them the steps, and I get excited about the steps. I got to slow down and go, wait a minute. What's most beneficial for them is the thing that's going to help them, right? I got to help them get the mindset in place first. So we battle that all the time. What we're talking about is, you didn't fail. Okay, you learned. But here's the thing. You only learn if you can come with those three things that we just talked about. Number one, operate from a mindset that perfection does not exist. There is no failure. There is no perfection. Perfection does not exist. Your entrepreneurial career is going to be a series of misses and lessons. Series of misses and lessons.
And the scorecard does not show how you got to the score. It just shows what your score was. So
the second thing you got to do is intentionally write down the thing that you learned. Intentionally. And number three, you got to write down and you got to take action on it. What are the steps that we need to implement in terms of maybe a step into a process or removing a step in a process? Who's going to be over that? All of the background information to make sure that lesson that you've learned is changing how it is that you're behaving, changing how it is that your strategy or your system is working in your business. That, at the end of the day, is how you're going to have misses be misses and not failures.
You didn't fail. There's something you learned if you believe it.
But remember, knowledge is only power if you implement the lesson that you've learned.
I'm Cameron Bailey. This is Sean Crabtree, and this is Growth Profits.
It's all about you having happier clients, better results, making more money, and enjoying the ride. Thanks for joining us on Growth Profits. We'll see you same time, same channel next week.